Hello, this is Jay Schaefer from Skylapser.com. Today we're going to be going over a time-lapse file import and create a time-lapse workflow using the Adobe Creative Suite. One of the first things is that I have all my time lapses is I have a separate drive to actually do my time lapses on, to store all the files and to create the actual time lapse videos on. So I have a dedicated drive to that, and so that's where we'll be importing our files to. And so that may be a part of your workflow that you want to add, is to actually dedicate a drive to that. And so I dedicate a drive to time lapses, and then I also have another drive that backs up my time lapses every night. And you can see that I've got my camera card mounted here from my card reader, and you may use an external card reader or whatever to bring your files in. And we'll just take a quick look at this, and we'll see here in the DCIM folder is that we have a folder 100 Pana for Panasonic, which is the camera that I use. And then you'll see that we have the files, and they're raw files, and they start numbering at 1, and they end up going through 363. As part of my workflow in creating time lapses, as in my camera settings, before I ever shoot a time lapse, is that I format the card in the camera just before I shoot the time lapse. So I just go to the menu and scroll down, and I go ahead and format the card. The second thing that I do is that I go into my menu again, and I scroll over to number reset. And so that resets the number, my file numbering, and it also can reset the folder numbering. So I just choose here, I choose number reset, then I choose file reset, and I choose folder reset. And so that ensures that my files are going to count up from, my folders are going to count up from 100, and then my files are actually going to count up from 00001. And so that is a thing that you'll find is really valuable in your workflow, especially like if you're shooting nighttime time lapses and it goes over midnight and your time lapse, your images are divided into 2 separate dates. Is having that numbering will help make sure that you keep your files sequential. All right, so we're going to open our files and import them using Adobe Bridge. So I'm going down here and I'm opening up my Adobe Bridge CC. And I'll go up to the File menu, and I'm going to choose Get Photos from Camera. And you can see that it found the no-name camera card that was mounted, and it says I've got 364 files, and there's about 5 gigabytes here. Okay, and so the first thing that we want to choose is where are we going to save these files. And so we can go ahead and choose here, and I'm going to go to my dedicated time-lapse drive, and I'm going to go into the time-lapse directory. And you can see that I have a bunch of other file folders, and they are numbered by the date that they were shot, and they also have a unique name. And so I'm just going to choose that level of the folder here, and then I'm going to create a subfolder using the custom name here. And I can also do shot date, and so I'm going to go ahead and do shot date, and then I'll rename that a little bit later. And so we're going to create a shot date folder in the time-lapse folder that's going to have the date that we shot these time lapses, which happen to be February 9th, 2015. Okay, and now the next thing that I can choose is I can rename all the files. And so rather than having P00001 and that would be numerous files on my computer that would have that name, I want to have something that's unique. And so I'm going to choose here is shot date plus a custom name. And this also helps with sorting and a couple other things. And so I'm going to go ahead and enter my custom name here. And I'm going to call this Trees and Stars. And I'm going to start the numbering at 001. I have a check mark here for preserve current file name in XMP, which is the metadata. And so that will keep those P numbers and it will keep the metadata along with the file. So that's a good thing to do. And then we're going to open the file all in Adobe Bridge so that we can preview them and cull out any images that we don't want to use in our final time lapse. We have an option here to convert to DNG, which is Adobe's proprietary RAW format. And I'm not going to go ahead and do that since the Adobe suite does recognize my Panasonic RAW files. And I don't want to delete the original files from my camera card because they act as kind of a safety net and a backup on that card, because I'll keep those files on that card until I format it just before I use that card again to shoot a time lapse. And so that's kind of an additional safety net. And then we also have another safety net here, and we could check the save copies to, and we could save copies of all the images that we import to another location or another hard drive. And this is great if you want to back up your files essentially as you import them. And it's a good practice to get into. However, since I have that dedicated hard drive and I back it up every night, I don't really have the space to save the copies anyplace else, so I'm not going to check that checkbox. There is an advanced dialog box here that you can open up, and you can kind of preview your files, and you can choose which ones you actually want to import at this point. But I'm not going to go ahead and do that at this point. And there's also some you can add some metadata here too. And so a lot of times I might want to go ahead and just do that just to be make sure that my copyright information and the XIF data there. And so I'll go ahead and do 2015. And then I can go back to the standard dialog here. And then I'll choose Get Media. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit of time to go ahead and import and copy those files over to my time-lapse drive. So now's a good time to go grab a cup of tea. And so once these files have imported here, and you will see that now it opens our files in Adobe Bridge. And you can see up here on the breadcrumbs exactly that it's opened up the folder. And so we have the 2015 February 09 folder that has all of our images in it. And so we're in the Filmstrip View here, and so I can go ahead and use my arrow key and step through, and you can see these were these test exposures that I was doing to make sure that I had focus and exposure correct. And you can also kind of get a rough idea to preview your time lapse by using this Filmstrip View. And so there's going to be no need for me to import some of these bad exposures here. So I'm going to go up here to the 10th exposure here, and I'll get rid of the ones that are earlier than that. And so I'll select those and go ahead and move them into the trash. Okay, so the next part of my workflow is that I want to kind of have a good representative exposure for all the files in the time lapse. And if we go ahead and, for example, if I go into the Essentials view, and you can see all the files here as I can scroll down, and you can see that as this time lapse goes along here, it gets quite a bit darker. And so I want to actually kind of have my raw settings for in the middle of my time lapse. So I'm going to choose a file in the middle here, which is like 185 is the number of the file. And I'm going to open that one in Camera Raw because I want to basically set up my settings for the exposure for that, which is in the middle of my time lapse. So I'll go ahead and do an open in Camera Raw. And so this is kind of an interesting frame that we have here, is that we actually have an airplane going through the exposure here, and then we have Jupiter, I believe that is right there. And so we're going to do our Camera Raw settings, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the exposure here, and I actually want to bring this exposure down just a little bit, and because it was a little bit too light where it started, and so I'm bringing that down almost a full stop, and then I'm also going to take the color temperature and I'm going to bring it more toward blue so that we have a bluer sky. And then I can also bring up the whites just to bring up some of the sparkles in the stars. I don't want to do too much there. I could dump the blacks. I think that, looking at the histogram here, is that I just bring these up to the point where I don't have any clipping. We can look at the histogram here, and you can see that we got this kind of stars up here, and you can also see that we've kind of got a blue sky. I'll put a little bit of clarity on here. I don't want to do too much because it adds noise, and a little bit of vibrance just for the saturation, and a little bit of saturation just to bring out some of the color in the stars. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and choose my detail tab up here in Camera Raw, because I want to do a little bit of noise reduction, because inevitably when you're doing star lapses is that you have a little bit of noise going on in the background. And so you can see if I adjust that, is this smooths out that background quite a bit. Now you don't want to overdo this or you'll lose a lot of detail and your stars will start to look muddy. And so I just add a little bit of luminous noise reduction. So that's an image that I like pretty well. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead, I can choose the snapshots. I don't really need to. I could be in the basic or whatever. I just come over here to the panel options menu, which is the little menu to the left of the panel here, to the right of the panel, I'm sorry. And I'm going to save my settings. So I could save all the settings here, or I could clear those off, but I'm just going to go ahead and save all these settings out. And then we'll recall these settings in Adobe After Effects to apply to all of our images. And so this is actually named this after that particular frame. And I'm just going to take the frame number out of there. And so 2015, February 9, trees and stars. And that's going to be our settings file. We'll go ahead and save that out. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel rather than done, so that we don't apply this metadata to this frame at this point. Okay, so now we've got that setting saved. We're actually pretty much done with Adobe Bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that, and minimize the old window there that I had of that. And I can go ahead and launch Adobe After Effects CC 2014. I'll go ahead and close the startup dialog, and I'm going to go ahead and save my project out right away. And so I'll go Save As, and I'll go to my time-lapse folder, 2015 February 09. And I'm going to, I'll come back and rename that folder. I misnamed that when I created it. So I'm going to open that folder, and you can see that all of our raw files are in there. And I've selected that, and I'm going to create a new folder within there. And this is going to be my project folder. And I'll call this 02 project. And then I'll go ahead and create that folder. And then I'll call this 2015 0209 trees and stars. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and import all my raw files here. So I'll go to File menu. And I'll go up one level, which, oops, actually that should have been down one more level. But you can see in the 2015 February 09 folder that I have all my raw file sequence. And we're starting with Trees and Stars number 10. And this is a Camera Raw sequence. So I'm going to open this. Okay, and so it was missing one frame for some reason. And then we'll go ahead and look at this first image here. And so again, this is the first image in the sequence, and we went ahead and saved out our settings for a later image, which was actually a better image. And so we'll go ahead and apply those settings to this image, and that will apply that to all the images within our time lapse here. So I'm going to go Load Settings. And I'm going to go ahead and choose my 2015 February 09 Stars and Trees. And you'll see that that applied those settings to this frame, and it's actually applied those settings to all the frames in our time-lapse, our image sequence. So I hit OK to apply those changes. And there's a couple ways that we could do this workflow. I'm just going to do the kind of the quick and dirty way, which is I'll drag all the frames onto a timeline, which will go ahead and create a comp for us here. And if I go into the composition settings here, you can see that this is 4,976 pixels by 2,800, which is a little bit bigger than 4K. Some people would call it 5K. And we kind of got a weird little aspect ratio there. And so I could go ahead and do a preset, an HD TV preset. For example, I'll go to HD TV 1080 24, so that I can I'll have this as a HD 1020 sequence. We'll hit return to accept OK, and you can see that now that actually my file frame is not over the entire and if I go After Effects is a little bit behind me. Okay, well, you can see that our frame is quite a bit larger than the HD frame, so I'm going to go ahead, twirl down my transform. I'm going to make sure that my scale is locked together, and I'm going to reduce that down. And actually, the setting is about 41% or so. 40% is about what, for my particular camera, that it ends up being about. And so I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and set that to 40%. And I'll do a fit. And you can see that that image pretty much covers the frame. A little bit of wiggle room there too. All right, so now I can take this and composition, and I can add it to my Adobe Media Encoder queue. And I can switch over here to Adobe Media Encoder, and then I'm going to choose a different setting here. I'm going to choose this. I'm going to make this for Vimeo 720 HP HD. I could have just as easily made that as 1080p or whatever I wanted to do. and then I'm going to choose where I need to save this. And so by default, it goes into an AEP folder there, and we're going to actually choose 2015 February 09. We're going to create a new folder in there. We'll call it renders. Then I'm going to create a new folder within there, and I'm going to call that 720p. And I can also append 720p here just to make sure that I know which file that is. Then I'll go ahead and hit save to begin rendering. Oh, and then I have to hit the start button. And then this is a good time to go ahead and get outdoors or socialize or take a nap or do something other than watch a render bar. And when we come back, we'll take a look at our completed time lapse. And so here it is, our completed Skylapse. This is Jay Schaefer with Skylapser.com. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and visit our website, skylapser.com.